So I know you're in favor of the legalization of marijuana based on like your past statements.
Decriminalization. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what is your opinions on like any regulations we should impose on it?
So obviously I think you need age regulations. I think you have to ensure that the weird thing about decriminalization of marijuana is that this free price is so cheap that decriminalizing it to the point where it's still not beneficial to buy it illegally is a little bit difficult. The reason I'm for decriminalization of marijuana, by the way, is not because I like marijuana. I think people who smoke it are losers. It smells terrible and you're wasting your brain cells. The reason that I'm in favor of decriminalization is because the government is terrible at everything. And whatever levels of criminalization have taken place have done nothing to prevent the access to marijuana for young people. They've just done nothing. I mean, when I was in junior high, in public school, Walter Reed Middle School, people were selling it on the playground. So that's not, so it's, you know, I think that treating it like cigarettes is probably the best way to do it. You know, a heavy tax and decriminalization to the point where if you're above a certain age, you can use it like alcohol or cigarettes makes the sense to me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question.
How do we stop the media with what they're doing, dividing us? They're dividing us greatly. How can we exchange something to make it different? What can we do?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing you can do is stop watching CNN and MSNBC. But
I don't.
I figured. From your question, I was assuming that. But I mean, the good news is that I think that the age of a dominant left media is basically over. The fragmentation of the media this is one of the reasons I'm hopeful. The fragmentation of the media has taken place. Like our website, which didn't exist 3 years ago, now gets to 140 million page views a month. So and we're not unique in that area. Like there are a lot of places that are getting more viewership. Also, I think more long-form engagement is happening too. And one of the problems that I have with cable TV in general is that you have to make an argument in 2 minutes flat or 3 minutes flat, which encourages you to make the broadest possible version of the argument and also to straw man the arguments. We're all better off watching, you know, hour-long exchanges than we are watching sort of the cable news cycle. And right now, it seems like the polarization that's happening on cable news is largely driving a lot of the hatred, because the easiest way, the easiest shortcut in politics to victory is to attack the character of the people you're talking about. And it's something I've been trying to work on myself, because it's so hard not to just call people stupid. But but with that said, you know, there's a Jewish principle called Dan L'Kaf, which is to suggest that you have to assume the best of intentions on the part of people. As a general rule, that doesn't happen too much in cable news. But I think the threat of the mainstream media is waning. I think President Trump has demonstrated, that's one of the things President Trump has demonstrated full scale. You know, this is, what I've always said about President Trump is that President Trump is a hammer in search of a nail. Sometimes he hits a nail. I mean, sometimes he hits a nail, sometimes he hits a baby. But when he hits when he hits a nail, it's deeply satisfying. And when he's hitting the media for being dishonest, it's obvious that they are not only being dishonest in how they cover some stories, but that they are dishonest about their central reason for being. They say that they're there to objectively cover the truth, and they are not, which is why there's a poll just last week showing that, well, 58% of Americans didn't trust President Trump to tell the truth. 64% of Americans thought that the media were more polarizing than Trump, which is an amazing statistic. So yeah, I think the media are on their way out. I think they got a problem.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben. I had a question regarding the current state of the Republican Party. Back in August, Matt Walsh, contributor to you, wrote that the greatest betrayal of the Republican Party was to fully fund Planned Parenthood and their omnibus spending bill. We have a Republican House, a Senate, and a president, and he still signed that bill.
Yep.
And one of their main pledges was that they were going to fund Planned Parenthood. And now our party is complicit in funding the largest provider of abortions. So I'd like to get your comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the real question for President Trump was he willing to actually veto? Because the fact is that this one came down to the Senate. There's such a slim margin in the Senate, and you have people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, obviously, who were going to vote against any budget that withdrew, supposedly. But in my view, is it worth trying to hold their feet to the fire? You bet. Right? There is no reason that the House ever should have passed a bill that included funding for Planned Parenthood. And if the Senate wished to pass its own version of the bill, then the House simply should have said, we refuse to take it up. If we have to shut down the government in order to defund Planned Parenthood, then shut down the government.
over the last few years, we've had, I think, about 5 million people, I think, leave California to go to places like Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, including myself, actually. Do you think that the massive migration of like middle-class people who moved out of the state, do you think that also has something to do with a lot of the policies that have been passed over the last few years?
Of course, yeah, there's no question that's the case. The people who are middle class, upper middle class, if you're very wealthy in the state of California, it's still possible to survive in the state of California, particularly if you're not really doing it a lot through income, right? If you're doing it through a lot of passive income, then it's possible to still live here. And it's a beautiful place to live. Like, you're not gonna see people who are exorbitantly wealthy moving from Malibu out to Dallas. Right? It's humid in Dallas. But it's, and if you're very poor, then there are a lot of social benefits to staying in California, but we do have an extraordinarily bifurcated state. The changing demographics of the state of California do obviously have a massive impact, and I think that's less true in terms of racial demographics than economic demographics. I think that bifurcation has created a bunch of very wild left rich people and a bunch of poor people who are looking at the rich people and saying, okay, give us a hand here. And that's been a serious problem for sure.
Hi, so I know the migrant caravan is a really big issue right now, and I just wanted to know, how do you think that the U.S. should respond? Do you think that it should be like how Trump is saying, how we should, once they come, we should greet them with military, or do you believe in a more peaceful approach?
So first of all, I will say, and I don't know, this is not popular necessarily in a lot of conservative circles these days. I think that the quote-unquote threat of the migrant caravan has been wildly exaggerated. What I mean by that is not that illegal immigration is not a threat. I spent half the speech talking about illegal immigration. What I mean is that there was a migrant caravan last year. By the time it reached the border, it was like 300 people. They went to a port of entry. About 100 of them ended up being able to be granted asylum, and 200 of them were deported. Okay, the idea that there are 10,000 people who are arriving armed with guns and rocks, and they're just going to try to break through the border, I haven't seen the evidence of that. And if that evidence were to occur, then I think that the kind of troop surge that President Trump is talking about at the border, then you might think maybe that's worthwhile, right? I mean, this troop surge is legitimately the size of the last troop surge in Afghanistan to meet what will probably be a couple of thousand people who arrive at points of entry. Now, I've been in favor of the wall. I was in favor of a physical border, a hardened barrier between the United States and Mexico before President Trump was. I will when he no longer is, right? I mean, I think that is a necessity in the same way that Israel has a border. So it makes perfect sense to me to have that border. But this notion that is being played up that this is a crisis, that the migrant caravan itself is a crisis, I think that that's being played up for political purposes. Now, what President Trump has done that's smart is he's trolled the left into responding in the stupidest possible way. So what the left has said, like really, this is one of his areas of genius. President Trump will say something. I don't think that it's advertent. I don't think he's doing it on purpose, but he's really good at it. He says something that there's like a center core of truth to it, but it's wrapped up in this bundle of manure. And then the left responds to the bundle of manure, and in the process, they throw out the central truth. So Trump says stuff like the migrant caravan is a crisis. We have to send people to the border now. If people show up with rocks, we should shoot them, right? I mean, like, he says these sorts of things. And then the left goes, "What? This guy's a racist. He's and everybody who agrees with him is a racist. And illegal immigration is not a problem at all. There is no problem of illegal immigration. Why are we worried about our southern border at all? Anybody who is worried about our southern border is a racist. So now, if you're a voter, you have a choice. You can either go with the guy who says illegal immigration is a crisis, or you can go with the people who say that illegal immigration not only is not a crisis, it's not a problem at all, and anybody who believes that it is a problem is a racist. And so you end up with these two positions that are both, like, if Democrats had a brain in their head, what they would say is, listen, illegal immigration is a problem. Here are some sane ways of handling illegal immigration. There's no reason to exaggerate the problem of this migration. We should have people on the border to stop it. People should go to ports of entry. We have ways of handling this. But exaggerating it is obviously a ploy for political purposes. Democrats won't do that because they hate Trump so much that anything he does, they just light themselves on fire. So it's...
Hey Ben, big fan. I know you're for defunding Planned Parenthood. What part? Just the abortion part?
Well, if you defund the abortion part, then the entire organization collapses.
Well, hold on. Well, wait a minute. Wait, hold on. Wait a minute.
Because the vast majority of money that
So-
they make
so are
is
you
based
saying-
on performance of abortion.
So you're against welfare, against WIC, against food stamps, right? We don't want to give any money to those people, right?
Well, what I'm in favor of is local societal help for folks who are in trouble. I don't believe in broad-based federal programs that create bad incentive structures.
Okay, so let me say it this way. So if somebody, last statement. So if somebody could go to I'd be for rather paying than, for food stamps or welfare or WIC, which I don't want to pay for anyways, okay? You're against my tax dollars, our tax dollars going for free condoms and birth control. To say that anybody's not going to have sex until marriage, that's an ignorant statement. People are going to have sex regardless. So could you give them free birth control and condoms and our tax dollars pay for that?
Well,
All right, we're
so,
good.
Okay, so
We're
here's,
good. Now let's let him answer. Thank you.
So my general rule is, if you don't want me in your bedroom, then let me stay out of your bedroom. Meaning that I've been told that it's none of my business what you do in your bedroom, and I'm totally cool with that. I don't want to be in there, man. That's wild, you know. But that also means that I'm not going to subsidize your sex life. If you and frankly, I am bewildered. I'm just bewildered by the argument that it is difficult to obtain birth control in this country. That's an insane contention. It's an insane contention. I mean, have these people been to a CVS? I also will say, just on a moral basis, I really don't like the argument, people are going to have sex anyway. Yeah, people are going to do a lot of stuff anyway. It doesn't mean I have to subsidize it. Like, I was, you know, as the man who was, in all likelihood, the most prominent and open virgin in America until marriage. Really, this is, it's not even a laugh line. It was a point of pride for me. It's a moral, because I believe that I believe it's a moral thing. Like, because I believe that marriage was designed to contain sex. Like, this is what marriage was designed to do. And separating marriage from sex has led to such significant ramifications for the society in terms of single motherhood, in terms of the demeaning of women, in terms of the rise of pornography, in terms of the destruction of relationships between men and women. It's been absolutely terrible. I was 24 when I got married, which means I was a virgin until I was 24. My wife was a virgin until she got married. That is a good thing. And the fact that and just because popular culture has decided to mock people who I think try to make good moral decisions about their sex life, popular culture is full of crap.
Hey, what's up, Ben? My name's Joel. Piggybacking on that, mom and dad taught you that. My wife and I, proud virgins. My brother and his wife, proud virgins. So I'm good with that. I'm proud of it. This question stems actually from a debate we had last week with the California Professional Firefighters Union president. Polls show that 70% of firemen and policemen are conservative and they're Republican. But yet, we give our votes constantly to the Democratic Party. We throw our names out for this crappy gas tax, for the dialysis center, just a bunch of nonsense that obviously unions have a bad look at. But as a fireman, as a policeman, we, again, have been giving our vote out. What can we do? What can I do to bridge that gap of those 70% of conservatives and win that vote? How can we bridge the gap with Republicans and go, hey, I know there's a bad rap with unions, but what can we do in order to change that vote and change the demographic?
I mean, the fact is that, obviously you're right, that the money that is being spent by all of these unions is going toward Democrats because there's a corrupt bargain between the unions and the legislators in the state of California. And the corrupt bargain is that if we spend a lot of money getting you guys elected, you will then sign pension-rich contracts that do not pay out over time simply because the money's not there. I mean, they're lying. Listen, here's the reality. They're lying to police. They're lying to firefighters. When they say that this money is in the pension funds, they are lying to you. It is nonsense. They're saying that stuff is accruing at like 8% a year. Okay, if I could get 8% a year on my money, I'd put my money in there. Like and this is true for virtually every public union in the state of California, which is why what you're seeing in cities like Stockton is that the first people who are getting nailed are the police and the firefighters. Right? This is what's happening all over the state of California. So, listen, I've been long in favor of right-to-work states. I think that getting rid of a corrupt system by which the state takes wages out of the pockets of professionals and then gives them to unions to be spent on the election of those legislators again, that is corrupt and terrible. And the only way that's going to stop is if people are able to actually form voluntary associations without the imprimatur of the state. If you want to negotiate with your boss, that's fine. But if you want to negotiate with the state of California on the basis of legislation that is promulgated, That's a real problem. That's a real problem. The unions are, public sector unions are a threat, and I know that it's become unpopular even in conservative circles to talk about public sector unions for cops and firefighters because we love cops and firefighters. But the fact is that the logic is no different than it is for any other public sector employee. And if we're not willing to say that, then that's what we're going to get. We're going to get a lot of money that is spent by unions that don't even represent their own constituents politically. There can be regulations that are put in place that prevent the use of those monies for politics themselves, which would be another way of doing this. If you don't want to actually just get rid of the unions, then what you do is you say they're not allowed to spend this money on politicking. They can only spend this money on services for their own members.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you if there was ever a specific point in your life where you just got really into politics, and what should young people like me do to start a career in politics?
Okay, so I honestly can't remember a time when I wasn't into politics. I was always very into history. The first chapter book I remember reading was, I think I was 4 and a half, and I was reading like a chapter bio of Benjamin Franklin. So I was always into this stuff. I found a paper that I wrote when I was 12 about the impeachment of Bill Clinton. So at 12, even at 12, I was in favor, by the way. But I think that the way to get involved professionally in politics, there are a couple of different paths, right? If you want to be involved in electoral politics, then getting an internship with a congressperson, going to work for a think tank like the Heritage Foundation is great. If you want to be sort of in the commentariat, what I always say is that you have to have a comparative advantage. Where are you an expert that nobody else is an expert? Pick a field, get really good at it, and suddenly you're offering facts that nobody else has. Because the truth is that, in the clean version, opinions are like armpits. Everyone has them. But that's it. But people start listening to your opinion if you actually have facts at your disposal that nobody else has. And so learning a lot, reading incessantly is the best way to get into this. And then when you get old enough, when you go to college, and you are at college, what I've said to every college student is what one of my mentors, Andrew Breitbart, told me, which is if you have a cell phone, you're now a reporter. Right? You're in an area where you can report on things that are of relevance to a huge swath of the public, and you should be reporting on that if you can get away with it. But learning and reading incessantly, like I put on my podcast, I recommend basically a book a day or a book every couple of days. And people kept asking me to post a reading list. I'm going to have to, but you should read Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt to give yourself a basic understanding of economics. Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell's another one. You should read probably a History of the United States by Paul Johnson, which is a really good kind of thick history of the United States. You should read the Federalist Papers. Like there's certain foundational documents that are worth reading and getting to know.
Hey, Bing, big fan. First, I want to thank you for being you. Well, you're awesome, dude.
Well, thank you. I didn't really have a choice in the matter, but thank you.
It's a blessing. I'm assuming that you've read Tolstoy's The Kingdom of God is Within You?
No, actually.
No? Oh, geez, I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to destroy your question. I've read a lot of other Tolstoy, but go ahead.
He posits basically a radical teaching of Christ turn the other cheek, which is like no violence in any way whatsoever. And I was, geez, I don't know if this is...
No, it's fine. I can get your premise. That's
yeah. I was wondering if you agreed with that and also how you would rectify that with the Second Amendment.
So this is one of the areas where I'm real fortunate to be a Jew. So the reality is that my understanding, and this is where I'll actually ask for a hand, but tell me if my understanding of this is correct. My understanding of turn the other cheek is not that if somebody is violent to you, that your job is to be pacifist in the face of violence. It's that you're supposed to, is that in soul, you're supposed to be humble enough to understand a rebuke.
The New Testament and the Old Testament support the Second Amendment. The turning of the other cheek was when you're personally insulted versus attacked, maligned, somebody breaking into your home. The Bible says, New Testament says that if you do not provide for your family, you're worse than an infidel, and that also means self-defense.
Wow. I have to say, I'm really liking this format. I can like tag out for a Christian. That's it's great. It's like Macho Man Randy Savage coming in from the top rope right there.
Generation Z is polling more conservative than baby boomers. How are we supposed to convince our peers that a life full of responsibility and Judeo-Christian values is going to be more beneficial to our souls in the long run than engaging in immediate pleasures?
So I think that that's something we have to be, it's a great question. And it is the only question that really matters, right? I think that the key is that kids have to be taught from a very young age that responsibility falls on them and that that's a good thing. You know, it's really interesting when you bring up young kids, right? Now I have 2 kids, so I can say this. Kids like rules and they like responsibility. Every kid, when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, they want to be an adult. Right now that we're adults, this is one of the big problems we have in our country is that all the adults now want to be kids. But kids actually want responsibility. They want to be given rules. They want the idea that they have been granted the capacity to shape the world around them. It's empowering to them. Kids want to be given the feeling that their life is an adventure. When you cripple a kid, like small kids, you cripple them when you give them everything. You cripple them when you tell them that everything is going to be provided for them without work. And I think that the human soul resonates to that. I said this the other day on one of my podcasts. I was talking about the fact that America is a significantly less mobile society than we were 30 years ago. And I think it's a serious problem. I think that it used to be, actually, you'll see a preview. So tomorrow, we air this Sunday special that I did with Tucker Carlson. And I like Tucker, but I have some pretty significant disagreements with Tucker. And Tucker is, I will say that Tucker, you know, who calls himself sort of a populist on economics, he's a lot closer to Bernie Sanders than he is to me on a lot of these issues. And you'll see, like when you watch the Sunday special, it's pretty fascinating. He pretty much, and he'll admit this, he'll say this. And one of the things that he says is you know, why should it be that people who are in towns where they're losing jobs, you're asking them to leave the gravestone of their father and their grandfather and move out to North Dakota and get a fracking job? And I said to him, right, because God told Abraham, leave the house of your fathers and go to a land that I will show you, right? All you are guaranteed in this life is adventure. And that's a wonderful thing to be guaranteed, right? That's what God guaranteed you when you were born. God said to you, I'm going to put you in a place where you don't know what's coming, and you don't know what's coming next, and all you have is the capacity to make choices that make your life better. All you have is the ability to go out and shape your future. And that's true. We are, when I say we are privileged, I don't mean we're privileged because we're rich in the United States. I mean we are privileged because we have the capacity to shape that adventure. We have the capacity to make those choices. In non-free societies, you don't have any of those choices. Those choices are not there. And when you say to a young person, go out and make your own choices, and that's really, when I say facts don't care about your feelings, that's really what I mean. Because what I mean is that reality exists. You can either embrace it and you can grapple with it, right? You can be Jacob wrestling with the angels, meaning wrestling with fate. You can be Jacob wrestling with reality, and you can overcome, right? You can. That's what you can do. And this is a common theme throughout the Bible. It's also a common theme throughout the history of the Enlightenment in Western civilization, right? The pasuk, the verse in Genesis where God talks to Cain, right? He says, you have an evil inclination, but you can overcome it, right? Team Shell, you can overcome it, right? That's a unique idea, and it's an important idea. And I think that young people resonate to that because young people do want to change the world. People who are 17, 18 years old don't want to be told that their future is going to be reliant on a universal basic income where they're going to sit there and somebody's going to send them a check in the mail and their entire life is going to consist of them sitting in a darkened room looking at a screen playing video games. What they actually want to be told is they can change the world. And one of the dangers in a free society is that 17, 18 years olds who are not, you know, given a purpose, when they think about changing the world, they think, okay, Bernie, you know, single-payer healthcare, get involved in politics. What we should be saying to them is, no, what we mean when we say change the world is build something. Go out and build something. Build a family. Build a fundamental building block of our civilization. That's what's going to make you happy.
Hi, Ben.
It is
very nice to have you.
It is my unenviable task to say we have time for one more question. Go ahead. It's okay.
You take 2 more?
2 more. You're the
okay,
boss.
we take 2 more.
2 more
One
questions.
and then 1 more. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I wish we had more time. But please, go ahead. We have time for 2 more.
First of all, thank you for coming. And my question is, how should the Republican Party reach out to Latino and Hispanic voters, considering that a great majority of us are actually conservatives? I'm one of the few Latinas in my community that are actually Republican, and when I reach out to my community, I'm labeled a racist and a
Right.
traitor. So how should the Republican Party reach out to a community that is actually a very big market for the ideology that the Republican Party stands for? And a follow-up question to that, if it's okay. Can you sign my very first Ben Shapiro?
Yeah, I'll sign that for you. As far as the first question, I spoke at the California Republican Party convention in 2012, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And one of the things that I said at the podium is that as many of us as possible should work on learning Spanish. This is not to say that folks who don't speak Spanish shouldn't learn English. They obviously should, so that we can speak the same language. But the language of conservatism is not relegated to English. The language of ideas spans all languages. So the first thing we can do is actually communicate in a language that folks speak in. So that would be helpful. Now the second thing that we can do is, as I said before, when we see racism, when we see things that are racially tinged, we should forcibly call them out and separate off from them. And that's important to do, because otherwise it lends credence to the lie that Democrats like to promulgate, that folks on the right are racist. The third thing that we have to do is we actually have to talk about what are the central priorities. So I've seen some conflicting polls about the Hispanic community that are kind of interesting. So more socially conservative, but also more in favor of government services than some other immigrant communities in the United States. And so we sort of have to recognize that as a fundamental truth. But I really believe that for every community, what has to be reinforced is that in a free society, you're either going to be dependent on private industry or you're going to be dependent on government. And this is where in a state like California, it's actually deeply imperative that we reach out and we go into particularly impoverished communities of every race. And what we do is we make clear opportunities for them from the private sector. So for example, I think that we should be going in and paying people's bus tickets and first month's rent to go get a job in an area where they can get a job. I think that major corporations should be going into areas and saying to young students, listen, you get straight A's, we'll pay for your college, and then you come work for us for 3 years. Right? There are programs that exist like this for some major corporations. Now, all of this would be changing the math a little bit. But the first thing you have to do is you have to forcibly fight back on the idea that you're a racist. So, I mean, honestly, my response when somebody says that I'm a racist is, you're a jackass, pardon the language. And the reason that I say that is because you cannot grant them the premise that it is even rational to call you a racist. Right? You have to say it makes you a bad person to call me a racist without evidence. Once we take that off the table, we can talk policy. But if you're going to make a character attack on me, I'm not going to sit here and take that, and I'm not interested in having a conversation with you.
Amen. All right, one more question. Final question of the evening.
Hi there, Ben. Appreciate you allowing me to ask my question. Ultimately, something I've been struggling with is I'm a very strong proponent, like you, of the pro-life viewpoint. And a big reason that is because I think that it's God's job and not ours to determine the intrinsic value of a life. Because of that, I've recently struggled with the idea of the death penalty. How have you balanced those contradictions?
So, number one, I think that babies are innocent, people who kill people are not. That's really the central contention of the death penalty. I think the death penalty exists for a couple of reasons on a purely secular level. So, without quoting the Bible and, if you shed blood by man, shall your blood be shed and all that. The secular rationales for the death penalty are twofold. One is the supposed deterrence effect. I actually think that one is less important than the second one, which is that there is a certain amount of retributive justice that is necessary for a society to function. And if you do not have, you see this in a lot of societies that don't have rule of law. It's fair to say that in a rule of law society like the United States, the death penalty is a little bit less important than it would be in other societies. But you particularly see this in societies where there isn't a solid rule of law, where if a member of one group kills a member of another group and there is no death penalty, and there's no good jail system, for example, then a member of the second group will then go and kill somebody as a member of the first group, and this is how you get tribal warfare. And this is why the idea of putting people to death for committing murder was originally proposed, on a secular level by societies, was you commit a murder, the state has an interest in killing you, because we can't have this lead off a cycle of revenge that you see. I mean, forget about in less developed societies, you see this in gang warfare on a routine basis, right? I mean, this is basically half the crime in the United States. So that exists on a secular level. As far as the morality, I really don't think the two are in any way similar. I think that if you rape and kill a child, you should die. If you are an innocent child in the womb, you should not. It's pretty simple logic there. As far as the efficacy of the death penalty in the United States, I think there's serious questions to be asked whether the death penalty is properly applied in the United States. In my opinion, it's not applied consistently or enough. If you're going to actually apply it, you have to apply it. You can't do this routine where people stay on death row for 40 years, and even then, it's unevenly applied. I think the best case to be made for abolition of the death penalty is not a moral case, it's a government sucks at everything case, because I'm always warm to that case, because the government sucks at everything. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful week.